Hey, Keith, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. How's it going today?
Going fine, Andrew. Thanks for having me on. It's a beautiful sunny day here in St. Louis. Perfect time to hang out with you and have an NA beer.
Yeah, I'm going to crack mine as well. And it's funny because before we went live, you made the comment and you referred to me as a podcast host, which is really funny to me because I never think of myself as that. Because really, I'm just lucky enough to talk to great people in the craft beer world all day long. And sometimes we're on camera, sometimes we're not on camera, but there's so many great people who operate in the beverage space. I'm just lucky enough to get to learn to a lot of great people. And hopefully, some of the conversation we have can entertain some other people out there in the world as well.
That sounds great, and it's always fun talking to you too because you're knowledgeable. You're a nice guy to hang out with, and yeah, it's just it's great. And then I also saw that you're going to be giving a seminar at the Craft Brewers Convention, so
I
that's
am. I'm
fantastic.
very much looking forward to it. It's 9 a.m. on the Sunday session. We're going to be talking about the importance of customer experience and engagement in the current state of craft beer, which in the pandemic I think is even more important to build those relationships, especially when guests are coming more intentionally to breweries. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Thanks for noticing.
Oh yeah, it's how can I not notice?
But let's dive into you because that's why we're here today. You've been in the beverage industry what 35 years now?
Oh gosh,
Yeah,
professionally, I
that's
started
a
in
big number there.
19 whatever started in 1986. Prior to that, I was a home brewer since 1982. So brewing since 1982, professional since 1986. So that might be before you were born. I hate to say.
So I think when you celebrate your anniversary in the industry, I'll be celebrating my birthday as well. So you've done a lot of great things in my lifetime, to say the least.
No, it's been a lot of fun. Beer is it's been my life, and when you start your career and finish your career and start a second career in beer, it really is. It's fun because at the end of the day, you're enjoying yourself with people. You're making products that people can actually consume and have fun and socialize with. Yeah, it's not like brain surgery or something where somebody's life is at stake, and yeah, you just try to have fun with it because life is short. You want to enjoy it as much as possible.
No, absolutely. I love your outlook on life. We'll dive into that in a minute. But, looking back before you decided to take the career in the beverage industry, like if you were a kid and you and I were hanging out in the playground, if I had asked you, hey, Keith, what do you want to be when you grow up? What was your answer as a kid?
When I was a kid, I wanted to become a pediatrician. It was, my mom, she was a nurse for years at the Veterans Administration Hospital. She retired. My uncle was an anesthesiologist. My aunt was a nurse. So, yeah, so I thought, I want to become a doctor. I want to become a pediatrician and help sick kids. And that was my dream. And then, I realized in college that a lot of the stuff I learned in molecular biology, everything is applicable in the beer world, not just in medicine. So I ended up getting a PhD in brewing and becoming a beer doctor instead of a people doctor. So, and I've never looked back. I've had fun since I made that change. Oh, and it's funny because I just completed a book for the Brewers Association called "Brewing with Cannabis," and I'm actually reviewing it right now because it's
Fantastic.
there it is. It'll be available. When is it? August 1st. But on the acknowledgement page, I actually thank my professor in Belgium for changing my career path from people doctor to beer doctor, and it's been so much fun. I've enjoyed every day of it. Now that I guess I'm on the well, I am retired, but my wife and I started another couple of companies because we love the business so much. But being on this kind of downward side, or maybe not downward, on the sunsetting side of my career, it's fun to help other younger people, with whether they have quality issues with their brewery, or they're just wanting to get into the industry and wanting to hear what it's like, or they want advice. It's like, what can I do to improve my chances of being a better brewer, or whatever in the brewing industry. It's fun to just give them my 2 cents on what's happened during my 30 35 36 year career.
Keith, if I could give you my 2 cents, I don't think you'll ever grow old because the attitude that you have is so positive, so energetic. As long as you have that energy in your world, every day you'll just be as young as the day before.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because sometimes I look in the mirror and I'm thinking, gosh, I'm getting old. But every time I do that, I just drink another can of our beer, and it's beer just keeps me young.
So I have to ask you, your positive outlook on life, where did that come from?
Gosh, yeah, that's interesting. Uh, I guess when you have your attitude on life, whether whether some people are negative or positive, a lot of times you don't really stop to think about that unless someone like you asks. And so, yeah, I guess so. If I think about it, it would probably be my mom, my grandfather. They were always positive thinkers. Nothing. I don't care if the sky was falling, if things were just going out of control. They always said, it could be worse, or look on the bright side. And they always had a positive attitude. And it's like when you grow up around people like that, you just something rubs off on you, and you become a positive thinker, and then you tend to avoid hanging out with people who are always negative and always thinking of the worst things, and you just shy away from those type of people and hang out around positive people. And the crazy part is usually other positive thinking people tend to hang out around you. It's almost like a magnet that draws everybody together who thinks in the same type of way. And it's in the end, it is nice because you end up helping each other. You end up just working together in one way or another. And yeah, and in the end, you just hope that when it's time to leave this earth, that it's a better place than it was when you got here.
Yeah, negativity is not doing anybody any good. So no, I love that about you, and I cannot imagine you angry. And I hope I never see you angry. But that's one thing that I think defines you is that smile and your just willingness to look towards the good in everything, whether it's beer or person or just the next day. You got to keep that positivity rolling.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's again, at the end of the day, life is just too short to be negative and feeling sorry for yourself, for others, or getting angry for things that are. When you step back and look at it, there's a lot of things people get angry about that are, it's like, why in the world would somebody get angry at that? Or, a year later, even a week later, you re-examine it and it's like, wait a minute, why was I upset over that minuscule thing? There's bigger fish to fry, bigger things around here to think about. So, yeah.
So Keith, when you told your mom that you were going to be a beer doctor instead of a pediatrician, how did that go over?
She did not like it.
Did it make her a little bit angry? Was she positive as usual?
No, she was let down. She wasn't angry, actually. She was let down. It's almost and I felt kind of bad at first because when you plan a career path and everything's kind of not quite set in stone, but everybody expects this, and all of a sudden you say, well, I'm not going to do that. It's she was let down, but once I got my doctorate in brewing, and she found out that only a few people in the world have done that, and she realized that, she said, "Wow!" And then when I created Blue Moon, she was the first to get out, and when she would go to a restaurant, she'd ask for Blue Moon, and of course, at the beginning, very few restaurants carried it, but she kept at it, and then. Once almost every restaurant in the United States carried it, she would always get a kick out of going to a restaurant and telling people, or asking for a Blue Moon, and then telling the server, my son invented this. And I'm sure those servers are probably saying, yeah, lady, how can I help you? You come on, let's get on with this. He probably invented Post-its too.
You want to tell me that your mom's the one who suggested the orange slice? Is that her?
No, that was me. It's funny because when I created Blue Moon, it was at a time when the craft brewing industry, was not as big as it is now. It was way smaller. People just didn't think of craft beer in the same way. In fact, they didn't even call it craft beer. It was called micro-brewed beer, and a lot of your listeners probably don't realize that, but it wasn't called craft. It was micro-brewed beer. And a lot of people thought it was a trend that was probably going to go away, similar to the red beers of the late 1990s and early 2000s, the LA beers, low alcohol beers, which are now in fashion again. some styles come in and out. Some are there for a bit and disappear. And people thought that way about microbrewed beer, especially at the end of the 90s when the first wave of consolidation hit. There was a lot of poor quality beer in the marketplace, and we saw a lot of brewers go out of business at the end of the 90s. But it was a whole different market, and it's also a market that most drinkers, when they thought of microbrewed beers in the 90s, they thought of amber ales, because the number one selling craft beer in the 90s, when I launched Blue Moon in 95, the number one selling craft beer was George Killian's Irish Red. And the number two was called Red Dog, or Red Wolf from Anheuser-Busch. Then there were just these amber ales that were out there, were just the leading microbrewed beers, and nobody thought Blue Moon would survive because, number one, it was cloudy. People said, "What's wrong with it?" Number two, it was Belgian, and at that time, very few people knew where Belgium was on a map, what in the world the country was. Nobody knew anything about Belgium back then. There were just a couple of bars in the United States, I remember, in 1995 that carried Chimay. What else? Chimay for sure, and maybe one or two other Belgian beers. And one was the Ginger Man. There was, and I think Falling Rock was in business, and they carried stuff too. So, but not many bars carried Belgian beers. So the general public didn't know typically what a Belgian beer was. So that's why Blue Moon was this anomaly when I launched it. Cloudy, Belgian, and so circling back to the orange garnish, I created that garnish in 1997 because sales in 95, it was really hard to get that brand out there and situated and growing because it was just so different. Most people were afraid of it, and they said, "I'm not putting that in my mouth. That's cloudy. There's probably something wrong with it." And so once I created that garnish, it really got people interested in it, and they said, "Wow, what's that hazy beer with that slice of orange?" And they would
Were
see.
you actually using the term hazy in '97?
Cloudy. I think I called it cloudy.
Sure.
And over the years, it got refined to hazy. So, but yeah, it was difficult back then, and I created that garnish in 1997. And once I did that, sales started ticking up. And then I did the iconic glass in 1998, and once that came together, and the look of Blue Moon came together, then it was. Gosh, it started growing, and we hit critical mass in about 2001, and that's when it just took off like a rocket ship. And we couldn't make enough. We were selling every drop we could make. So it was about a 6-year journey at the beginning. That was really uphill, really hard, but by the time 2001 came, it's like, man, this is it's all hands on deck because we got to make beer. We got to make more beer, and also at that time, I was experimenting with new styles. So I launched the first nationally available pumpkin beer in 1995, before the pumpkin craze. And it's funny because back then, nowadays, we've kind of reached that peak of pumpkin beers, and it's gone down a little bit there. But there are still breweries making pumpkin beers. But at one point, everybody was making pumpkin beers. That must have been, I don't know, maybe about 8 or 9 years ago, something like that. And I think people got tired of a lot of the pumpkin beers because there were some that were really overboard in spices, and they were just hard to drink. And but Blue Moon, that was 1995, and it was one of the first it was the first nationally available pumpkin beer, because the only one I remember before that was Buffalo Bill's Pumpkin Ale, I think it was called.
Yeah, I've read articles about that one before.
Yeah, they were the first, but they weren't national. They were, at that time, they were out of California. I think it was like Hayward, California. And I remember I happened to taste some, and I thought, this is cool. This is what our fall seasonal for Blue Moon should be, a pumpkin beer, not an Oktoberfest. And I remember in those days, the distributors were saying, we need an Oktoberfest. And when I launched the pumpkin, they said, "What is this? We can't sell this." And but we kept at it, and I remember the first year we may have made, I don't know, a couple thousand barrels. Then it maybe peaked at maybe 4,000 barrels, somewhere around there. But then it just dropped, so that by 1999 to 2000, I think we only sold less than 100 barrels, which is nationwide. That's nothing. And
Well,
then
you know why it wasn't as successful, right?
no,
You didn't have the garnish on the side of the cup,
a, an orange. Maybe I should have put a big
or
orange,
maybe a pumpkin. You need
a
a pumpkin
pumpkin.
on the side of the cup.
There
There
you
we
go.
go. There's a missed opportunity, Keith.
That's it, yeah. But we stuck with it because everybody was pressuring me to cancel the pumpkin, and but I really felt strongly that it was ahead of its time. And sure enough, it turned around. Sales kind of were up a little, sunk, and then it came up, and now it's the biggest. Blue Moon is the biggest pumpkin beer every year in the United States, and it really. Yeah, it took off, and people still love it. You know, people love it because it's been around for so long. It's kind of a staple for a lot of people to kind of signal the beginning of fall and football season, turkey season. You know, everything that happens in fall. So it's yeah, it's just a fun beer to celebrate fall with.
Absolutely. And looking back at your early years with Blue Moon and creating it, it's almost like a rock star's journey. You put out your record, then you just go straight to the top of the charts. And next thing you know, you're on all the publications, you're on all the talk shows. When you signed up for this and you were the brewmaster, created the recipe, put it out to market, did you expect to also be the face of the brand?
No, not at all. I was thinking this is crazy. But at the time, Blue Moon needed somebody front and center to say, this is the person who created it. This is the brewmaster. And I happened to be there. And at first I refused. I remember the first commercials to come out. The first commercial was actually just an illustrated commercial. The one thing I did though was, there were some people that said, oh, we should have, girls in bikinis or, something like that. And I said, no, because during my time in Belgium, when I was there, I saw that the Belgians would always put food in commercials with their beer because it was almost like wine. They didn't put scantily clad women running around. So they put food and beer and situated it so that it looked delicious. And I thought that's what we're going to do with Blue Moon. It's going to always be with food, not with girls. And then I remember at that time there were a lot of campaigns in the United States by big brewers featuring like scantily clad women, the Swedish bikini team, and all these things like that. And I'm thinking, there's no way we're going to do that with Blue Moon. But we needed somebody up front because we did start out with food and beer, and so finally I said, okay, I'll do it, but it's going to be in a unique way. So we created those stop motion commercials in the early days where I'm illustrated kind of, and then John Legnard, who he was our assistant brewer back then, he's in some of them. And then when I retired, he took over. So now he's in charge of Blue Moon and doing a great job. And but yeah, so the early ones were just like cartoonish claymation type of things, and so that was good. And it helped transition me into being the face of the brand, because eventually I thought, I do have to get up front and center and actually talk about it and actually defend the brand, because there was so much negativity against big brewers and against everything big brewers did. And I said, wait a minute, yeah, this is part of Molson Coors, or at that time it could have been MillerCoors or Coors, whatever it was. And I said, yeah, we're part of it, but we're this operating unit that has a lot of freedom to do stuff, and we can create our beers. And yes, there is a nice distribution network to tap into, but if we don't have the right product for that network, they'll tell us and they'll stop carrying that brand, that flavor, whatever it is. And so and every time someone would say something negative like that, oh, you're part of Coors or whatever, I would talk about what Jim Cook from Boston Beer used to say in the early days. Because if you remember, when he started, he didn't have a brewery. It was all contract brewed, and people would criticize him and say, "Oh, you're just a contract brewer. You make terrible beer." it's all about the marketing, because he spent a lot of money on marketing to get people to try his beer, and they said, oh, it's just marketing, you're buying people, buying customers. And his response to them was, you know what, good marketing will only kill a bad product faster, which is absolutely true, because if you have great marketing and everybody knows about your product, if it truly is bad, it will die a quick death. But if it is good, it'll live on and keep growing. And that's what happened to his products. And same with Blue Moon.
And that statement's so true today. I mean, craft beer, I mean, everybody's making great products these days, but you got to also know how to run your business and market it properly. That comes up in almost every single conversation I have.
Yes.
And you mentioned you got a little negativity towards Blue Moon, but I like to turn that around and say it was almost a gateway drug. And we'll talk more about drugs later in this conversation, but it's almost a gateway drug for people to get further into craft beer, because at that point in time, not every neighborhood had their local tap room. You couldn't get craft beer in every corner. So I'd love to hear about your thoughts on the role of Blue Moon creating more craft beer drinkers.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Because in those days, when craft beer started, really it was like amber lagers, deeper golden lagers like Sam Adams, amber ales like Fat Tire and Sierra Nevada, but nothing really over the top until late 90s, mid to late 90s and the 2000s. And so there was, for the typical beer drinker, which, most people were light beer drinkers back then. And for the typical beer drinker to transition into craft, they had to take a step either through amber ales or things like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, which, nowadays Sierra Nevada Pale Ale to me is pretty tame. It's not a radical beer. It's easy drinking. I could chug a 6-pack of their Pale Ale with ease. And but back then in the 90s, it was a beer with a lot of flavor, and that was a big step for a Bud Light drinker to go to that. And so there was the need for a transition or a gateway type of product. And Blue Moon was perfectly situated because the flavor profile was very smooth, very easy to drink, with the orange garnish and the orange peel it was brewed with, and the coriander, which gave a nice fruity, general fruitiness to the beer. It allowed people to try a craft beer and say, wow, that's not that bad. I'm not as afraid of this now as I was. And so people would try it, and they would go from, my favorite saying is, they would go from being afraid of it to falling in love with it to recommending it to their friends. And that's exactly how it went. And so it became this perfect gateway beer to transition people into the world of craft. And it's funny because, at the time I saw that. I never could describe it in those words, though, until later when I saw it in print. I saw journalists talking about it, describing it as a gateway beer into craft. And that's exactly what it was. And I've heard back from so many people over the years that it was their first craft beer that got them into craft, and they loved it. And there's some who kept going on their journey in craft beer, and they went past Blue Moon and just kept going head first into craft. And there are others who used Blue Moon as their new go-to beer. So they would try it, be craft drinkers, and then they would experiment with something like a India Pale Ale or a Imperial Stout or whatever, and that would be good. But then they'd come back to their go-to beer, which happened to be Blue Moon, or for some people it would be Sam Adams Lager or Fat Tire. But these Blue Moon served as a gateway beer for quite a few people. And then on top of that, I get a lot of emails anymore. It's a few, but in the 2000s, I got a lot of emails from craft brewers who said, thank you for creating Blue Moon, because it got me into craft beer, and it got me to thinking that I can also do that and I can become a craft brewer. And so quite a few brewers tasted it as their first craft beer, and it got them into the industry, which is really, for me, I'm proud of that too. It was a lot of fun.
No, I think it's all about gateways and finding a way to attract that consumer who might not be currently drinking what you're producing, but find
Yeah.
ways you can get them more interested. I mean, we could have another conversation to debate the word crap. That's a whole nother day. We
Yeah.
could have another conversation to debate seltzers being served in breweries. But either way, anything we can do to get people aware of what breweries are making and spending more time there, I think can be valuable for the industry as a whole.
I agree 100% because whenever you go to a craft brewery, whether it's your local one closest to your home or whether it's one when you're on vacation, when you go there, you realize that those brewers are really like artists. Their canvas is the brew house. Their paints are the malts and the hops and spices, and they put them together in so many different ways. And the fun part is trying their work of art. And to me, it's so much fun. And all of them are different. Even IPAs, everybody may make an IPA, but this brewery's IPA is different than that one, and they've got nuances, and they're just so much fun to try. I love it.
If you released Blue Moon in 2001, do you think you'd have to sell it as a hazy Belgian? Would that, make things sell a little bit better?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. Because yeah, in these modern times when hazy stuff, hazy IPA and everything, it's some people look for hazy IPA now as they want it that way, and it's funny because back then, hazy Blue Moon, it was unfiltered, and it was difficult to try to figure out the right way to brew to get that haze to stay in suspension because over time that haze tends to settle out to the bottom of the bottle or the can. And I remember we went through a lot of brewing experimentation to figure out how to brew to get that haze to be fully suspended and just stay there, because some of our competitors, I remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, some of them we analyzed and we said, wait a minute, this isn't a natural haze. Some were adding these oil emulsions and stuff to get the cloudiness in a beer. And I remember looking under the microscope at some of them and seeing, just millions of little oil beadlets and these little circular beadlets. And there were just millions. And I was thinking, this is crazy. This is an artificial haze. And then some of them would use pectin. They would just sprinkle pectin in, and that created the haze. And I was thinking, these guys are cheating because Blue Moon was just never filtered. It was brewed, never filtered, and the haze was just natural in it. And I think in the end, when I look at it, I think consumers tasted it and they said, it's natural. There's nothing else added here. That isn't a flavoring. It's not an artificial emulsion. It tastes good. It cleans up well on the palate. And yeah, and so I think that when you make a high quality product, it's like I think people love it, and it just grows. Because when I look at other Belgian whites, Blue Moon was a unique one because I created it different than a traditional Belgian white. So if you go over there, you'll see that they do taste different. They're unique and they're enjoyable. But I wanted Blue Moon to be unique for the American market. So there are several things different about it. If you try some traditional styled Belgian whites, such as Allagash white, that's a really nice one. White Rascal from Avery, that's another nice one. You try those and they're really good, but they're different from Blue Moon. But they're more traditional, similar to the types you find in Belgium, and so they're different, but still good. And that's what I love, is trying all these different beers because they're just so flavorful and they're expressions of what that brewer was trying to do.
No, absolutely. That's the fun of beer, of course, just trying new things, having new experiences. So speaking of experiences, you spent so much time at Coors, so many years. At what point did you decide you wanted to move on and do something new?
Well, yeah, it was funny because after I had launched Blue Moon, well, even during my time there, I did so much. I led a team that reformulated the Coors Banquet brand. So, a lot of fellow brewers are Banquet drinkers because, it's just an easy drinking, flavorful beer. And I reformulated that with the team. I led the team back in the year 2000. Yeah, 2000 is when actually 1999 we started, because a lot of folks don't realize that when Coors Light was launched in 1978, it started growing And when it did that, it was cannibalizing the original Coors brand. And so I remember the marketers tried all different new names to get that brand to reverse and start growing again. They started by calling it Coors Draft, Coors Original, Original Coors, and nothing seemed to work. And so that's when I got a team together and we reformulated it. Changed the marketing so it went from Original Coors to being called Coors Banquet beer, which actually is a great traditional name because it was called that back in I think it was the late 1800s when miners would drink it and serve it at banquets in Colorado. And so we did all that, did the research because they have a really good rich archive section, and we tried to stay true to all the original roots of it and relaunched it in 2001, I think it was. And it changed from declining in sales to going on like a 17-year growth run. So it was really nice. Then I did a whole bunch of other work there. But to answer your question about leaving, it was after all that work and after Blue Moon had gone on to become the biggest craft beer brand in the world, and I had launched it in a bunch of countries. I reached a point where I said, I've done everything I want to do in the big world of beer, and there was not much left to do. And so that's when I said, I'm ready. I can actually officially retire with a pension and with all that stuff from Coors. They don't offer that program anymore, but I was lucky enough to get into it, and I reached that point where I said, I can walk out of here with pension, health insurance for my family. I could cash out my stock options and my IRA, or was it 401k, all that stuff, and just walk away, and still maintain great relationships with all the folks at Coors. And so my wife and I talked about it for a while, and we said, that might be something we could do, and then transition into another world of beer. And so,
were you already thinking about the next steps when you retired from Coors?
Yeah, we were, because we were intrigued by cannabis because it had become legal in Colorado in 2012. Colorado was the number 2 state to legalize recreational cannabis in the United States. A lot of folks believe Colorado was first, but it was the number 2 one. The first one was Washington State, and then I think it was just only 4 days later or something, Colorado became legal. So, but Colorado, it was legal since 2012, and my wife and I thought, this is great, a great new industry that's just starting, and we need to bring something that's socially acceptable. Because when we thought about it at the beginning, we thought most people consume cannabis by smoking it, and that's not real socially acceptable because smoke is inherently non-social. Some people don't like it. Some people are truly allergic to it. Like if you have asthma, you can't be around smoke. And so, there's a lot of negative issues with smoke. And then we thought, if we want something truly social, beer is something that's very sociable. You go to a party, drink a beer, and just talk and converse. It's like you don't even have to drink them. You can just walk around with a beer can all night and just walk around. And some people, they'll actually do that. And it's nice just to have a beer in your hand. And we thought, let's bring sociability to cannabis. And so that's when we thought about it and said, we can do this. And that's when I decided to retire. Is I met the point at Coors where I could officially retire, and my wife and I had discussed it enough to say we can actually step away from Coors and Blue Moon and all that and start something completely new and almost revolutionary. So that's when that was late 2017, and my last day there was like January 5th, 2018. And then from that point on, we jumped headfirst into the world of cannabis and non-alcoholic beer.
So besides seeing the opportunity in the industry, was there that one aha moment where you knew you had to jump on it?
Not really. It was kind of careful because beverages were not a big part of cannabis at the beginning. And in fact, very few people even knew you could consume cannabis in a beverage form. A lot of people said, they were very reluctant to even try it. And most people just never even thought of it. They would go into a dispensary to buy vape pens or smokables, flour, or they would buy the few gummies or chocolates that were there. Very few people knew you could drink cannabis, and so it was difficult. There wasn't really an aha moment. So, but we got in. I guess the aha moment was aha. This is really hard. We can't. By the way, you can't mix alcohol and cannabis. So I had to create some really great tasting non-alcoholic beers, which was hard to do. And because most people think, oh, that's easy, you just because people have tried like O'Doul's and some of the older non-alcoholic beverages in the marketplace, and they said, oh, that doesn't taste that good, it's easy to do. But in fact, it's hard to make a non-alcoholic beer that tastes like beer and that actually is drinkable. And but I reach back into my memory banks from the time in Belgium when they actually taught us about all the scientific ways of making non-alcoholic beer. And so I was able to create some beers that I think smell and taste like beer, and they go really well when you put cannabis in them. So yeah.
So you had quite the challenges ahead of you. Like any entrepreneur, you have trial and error that you're going to go through. And first off, you were trying to make a non-alcoholic beer that tasted delicious, and you were also trying to infuse it as well. Which came first? Did you have to perfect the non-alcoholic recipe, then perfect it once again? Or what was your process like to get to that recipe you were proud of?
Yeah. First, it was perfecting the taste of the recipe, so it actually smelled, tasted, looked like beer. Because from our perspective, my wife and I were saying to ourselves, we would just talk pretty often about what this thing should be, and we said, well, we want something that smells and tastes like great craft beer with the effects of cannabis, not the smell or taste of cannabis, because we've been around cannabis for a while now, and the smoke, it's something that some people say, oh, that smells like a skunk, or it's terrible or whatever. But we realized quickly that the smell of cannabis is polarizing. That means people either love it or they hate it, and most people just do not like the smell of cannabis, the majority. And so, and we don't have science behind that, but we've talked to a lot of people enough to say, we don't have to do a consumer research study. That we've talked to enough people that we can probably say a good 75% of people don't like that smell. 25% absolutely love it. They can't get enough of it. And so we said, well, let's avoid that smell and focus on the great smell and taste of craft beer, but the effects of cannabis. And so that's when I really had to focus on making great non-alcoholic beers that had not just the taste, the smell, but the body. So, you're not having something watery and thin. And it had great head. I mean, if you pour out our IPA, just all the brewing steps we go through, you'll see that it has head like crazy on it. And that's just because of the malt and the hops and the brewing procedure we use, because it just really is a great beer to pour out and enjoy visually. So yeah, we are proud of that, and I went through a lot of work to find a recipe that I create a recipe where it has great head, smell, taste, all that. Same with the Belgian white. We're proud of that one too, and then the second thing was cannabis. It's like, okay, how do you get cannabis in beer? And we found out quickly that it is hard to put cannabis in beer. You have to make it water compatible. A lot of people say water soluble, but with water soluble, what you're talking about there is when you put a compound into water, it breaks apart and the water is still brilliantly clear. Things like you put sugar into water or sodium chloride, table salt into water and stir it, it'll dissolve and it'll go 100% into the water and you won't see anything, but you taste it and it's there. And so that's because those are water soluble. They go in and they break apart and they're in the water. But with cannabis, you can put THC oil into your beverage, mix it up, and nothing's going to happen. It'll float to the top. And so what you have to do is you have to make it water compatible by using an emulsion. And the best way to think about it is when chefs make a salad for their a dressing for the salad, a lot of them will put spices and herbs and vinegar and oil and shake it up, and then pour it on your salad, and and it's freshly made. But what they're doing is they're putting two things together that don't want to go together: oil and vinegar, which is like oil and water. You shake it up, and then it'll be cloudy for a while, but eventually it'll separate, and then you'll have your oil on the top and your heavier water on the bottom, and because they won't go together. But chefs out there know how to emulsify it, that is, make it come together so it doesn't separate. And by doing, they'll add some can add egg white or eggs, some can add sugar, vegetable gums, all these different little tricks that chefs use to emulsify or mix these two things together, and they'll stay together. They'll shake it up with that bit of vegetable oil, vegetable gum, and it'll stay mixed for quite a while, versus separating fairly quickly. And so we had to do that with cannabis. In fact, not just us, everybody who has beverages has to do that. And you find that there are some emulsions that work very well that get cannabis oils into the beverage. And but then you find out quickly that the can liner, the liner of the can. In fact, a lot of people don't realize that every aluminum can, whether it's a can of Coke, Pepsi, root beer, anything, the inside of the can has a sprayed on liner that protects the beverage from the aluminum, so you don't get any aluminum taste or any effects of the aluminum. And it's there for the protection of the liquid, and then ultimately the protection of the consumer. But every can has that liner, and what happens is the cannabinoids and the emulsion will want to stick to the liner. And so if you put cannabis in on day 1, by day 30 you can measure it, and there's no cannabis left in the liquid because it's all stuck.
Did you learn this the hard way, or how did you discover this?
Partly hard way, and partly a lot of other people, not a lot, because there are not a lot of people making beverages, but everybody started to notice. They would say, you know what, the cannabis is kind of slowly disappearing over time, because you measure on day 1, and there's for us, like our Belgian white has 5 milligrams of THC, and our IPA has 10 milligrams of THC, and on day 1 it should have 5, and in Colorado your leeway is 15%, so it could be plus or minus, and you'd see that over time it would gradually go down. And so the first thought is, something's happening. Let's go on that high side of that 15%, so that it stays there and for a while. And but then as you do research, that's what happens, is you see it's sticking to the liner. So then you either work with the emulsion to make it slippery so it doesn't stick, or you work with the can liner and say, let's find a can liner with a can that allows this stuff to slide off versus adhere to it. Or you do a combination of a specialized can liner with a slippery emulsion, and everything stays in solution. And so it's a lot of work, but eventually you get there.
Very interesting. Now, were you doing a lot of research and development in your final years at Coors?
Not a lot. Mainly it was, my final probably 3 years, it was really a lot of travel. I was living out of a suitcase because at that point, Blue Moon was being launched around the world. I would travel to Japan and then Australia and visit the markets and everything. And by the time I'd get home, I'd have calls from the distributors in Miami, New York, Chicago, saying, can you please come out and talk to our retailers, and please do a special beer dinner with Blue Moon beers paired with everything, because we have our top buyers from this chain or that chain or whatever. And so then I'd have to repack my suitcase and head out in the domestic market. And it was funny because now in the world of the pandemic, it's rare that people are just starting to travel again. Prior to this, I was on the road so much. I was a 1K traveler for several years. And for your listeners who may not travel a bunch, 1K means that you're, at least on United, every airline has their own special terminology, but on United, a 1K means you fly more than 100,000 miles per year. That's in the air. That doesn't mean getting points from using your United credit card. It's you're flying in the air. And so I was more than 100,000 miles every year. And it's like, you get perks, and my kids and other people would say, "Oh man, you get to go to the front of the line. Oh, you get a free upgrade to first class." And it's like, I earned that, because I spent my time in the trenches, just flying all the time, and you get some perks, but at the same time, when you're at airports all the time, it's no fun. It's no fun to travel that much. At least
that's a lot of time on the road for sure. So when you launched CERIA with your wife, did it feel like you were at a startup again? I mean, you're back in the lab, you're going through all the processes, figuring things out. Did it feel like you were the entrepreneur now versus working for a company going through the motions?
Oh gosh, yeah. It's funny because I remember at Coors, they had so many specialists doing everything. Like if things as simple as you forgot your key to your office or whatever, you just say, "Oh man, I don't want to drive home," and so you get on your cell phone and say, John was our locksmith. I'd say he was on my speed dial for some reason, and I'd say, "John," I said, "Can you let me in my office? I forgot my key," or something. And of course they'd come up and adjust things and get in or bring a master key or whatever. Or there were specialists for everything, even ordering, procurement. You'd say, you'd call up procurement and say, I want to experiment with some new hops. And can you give me the latest hop varieties from Haas or from whatever company? Because I want to do a hand rub test, and I want something tropical or whatever. And they'd bring you, within a week or so, you'd have 5-6 different varieties to play around with. So it's like almost at a moment's notice you could do anything. And then when you're on your own, it's like if you're locked out of your office, it's like I got to look online for a locksmith, or else I have to go all the way back.
Or you're calling your wife up and telling her you locked yourself out again. She has to come home and let you back in, and we all know how that goes.
Yeah, she'd say, "Are you crazy? I'm not gonna go." It's like you gotta wait. I'm not gonna be there right away. So stuff like that, stuff like setting up your own computers and networks, buying all that stuff, and then calling a specialist in to. Luckily, my wife's brother-in-law, our brother-in-law is an IT guy, and he was able to set us up. And he has his own small business, so he was able to set us up at the beginning, and he's still our IT guy. So we lucked out there. But other things, buying an office chair or whatever, you go to Office Depot or whoever's having a sale, and you do that. And it's just when you come from the big corporate world where all that stuff is just a phone call away, and you have to do it yourself, it's a whole new experience. It's humbling, but at the same time, it makes you appreciate different things. Like when you look at small business people and you see how they operate and everything, it's like, wow, that person has gone through a whole bunch. They know exactly what they're doing, and it's not by chance. It's not, they've been through the trenches. They know how to do this, how to function. It's a whole new skill set you have to develop. And so it's and for me, it's been fun because my wife and I, we wanted to get into this. It's not like we were forced to get in, and it's like, oh man, I got, we wanted to. So for us, it's been a challenge, and it's been fun. Some things are not as fun, but yeah, there's a lot of challenges when you're on your own, unique ones, and but it's every day is a challenge, and it's fun, and we're still enjoying it.
When you created CERIA, was it almost as a challenge to yourself to see if you could do it? Because there's someone else who you remind me of a little bit, Peter, who used to be with New Belgium. He started a brewery with his wife as well when he left New Belgium. You can do it for someone else, but in the back of your mind, did you have the itch to see if you could create something from the ground up?
Yeah, I think in some way, I think all of us have that itch. If we're working for a big company or even a medium-sized company, a lot of us have that itch to say, maybe I can do this better. Of course, there's a lot of people that don't do that, because either out of fear or out of, they want that stability of a job, and some people just never do it. And at the end of their careers, they're saying, "Oh man, I wish I would have done that." And luckily, I was at the point where, I had a pension and all that, so we were not. Financially in dire straits, having to do something for us. And at the same time, though, we weren't fabulously wealthy that it's like, oh, we can do this and this. We watched our pennies every day. And but yeah, it's there was always that thing deep inside saying, I bet I could do this. I bet I could do something better. And yeah, and Peter Buchart, he's we've known him for a long time, because a lot of people don't realize that in the early days, after I got my PhD in brewing, I had come back, and Jeff Liebisch and Kim Jordan had just started up New Belgium, and so my wife and I went up there we called and said, "Hey, I just got back from Belgium with a PhD. Can we visit your little Belgian-style brewery?" And Jeff said, "Sure, come on up." And it was in the basement of their house, and Jeff had cobbled together these tanks, three. There's like a brew kettle, a lauter tun, and a mash tun, and they had a couple fermenters down there, and I remember it was real crude, and we tasted some of the beers, and I remember just saying, these beers taste they taste slightly sour. You have a little infection. And he said, yeah. He said, but I don't have a lab to fix this stuff. And I said, well, I got a lab. I said, if you want, do you want me to propagate some yeast for you? He said, would you do that? And I said, yeah. So in those days, he was using Chimay yeast out of a bottle. I said, are you, what type of yeast are you using? He said, well, we just get a bottle of Chimay from the liquor stores, and he'd pour out the beer, get the yeast, and grow it up. And so I said, well, if that's what you want, I can do that. So I would propagate yeast for him, and he'd come, I don't know, every 3 months or so for a fresh, like a liter. I'd have a liter of pure Chimay bottle yeast, and he'd pick it up, and we'd talk, and then he'd go back, and then I helped him with the formulation of Fat Tire at the beginning, because Fat Tire, when he launched, it was more robust in taste, and I said, you've got to streamline this and make it a little more mainstream, because it's a bit much, and you need. In those days, I called it his bread and butter beer. I said, you need something to pay the bills. So he because he was using. What was it? A lot of chocolate malt. It had more bitterness, more body. It was a bigger, bolder version of Fat Tire, and so he streamlined it, made it more mainstream. And I don't know if it was that or just the market, but things really changed, and Fat Tire really took off. And then I helped bring over Peter Buchart, so he needed a brewer, and so. The first one was another one, but then Peter was the second Belgian brewer. I helped bring over the first one. Then I wrote a letter to the Immigration and Naturalization Service, saying, Peter is needed because of his skills here, and there aren't very many Americans with these skills. And luckily, we got him a green card, and he was their brewer for 16 or 18 years before he retired and started his own little brewery, Purpose Brewing, up in Fort Collins, Colorado.
I was lucky enough to talk to them a few weeks ago. Fantastic people. And It's so funny, your relationship with New Belgium in the early days, because I think it really speaks to the early days of craft beer, where there's so much positivity, so much community. Is that what you see in the non-alcoholic world right now?
Yeah, I think you're right. Because in the early days of craft beer, there was this camaraderie, and just people would help each other. You'd if you needed. You're short a couple bags of a certain type of malt, you just call the next closest brewer to you and say, hey, we're 100 pounds short of Munich. Do you have any Munich I could borrow? And they'd say, yeah. And 10 minutes later, they're there with their car, opening up the trunk and saying, here's your 2 bags. And you'd say, awesome. Let's share a beer together after this. And and it was just a whole different time. I mean, it still exists today in a way. There's much more competition. But in the world of non-alcoholic beers, I think it's like that right now, where there's not very many of us making only non-alcoholic beers. There's, less than 10 that are focused only on non-alcoholic beers. Might be even 5 or so. But anyway, yeah. So it's more or less, you know each other, and you know what you're doing. But we're scattered all over the country, so it's not like we can call. Jeff at Well-Being or Bill Schufelt at that Athletic and say, can I borrow 100 pounds of this grain or that or hops? But we know of each other.
No, it's been great to try so many great new athletic and all the other non-alcoholic beers of the few years that you've helped produce. And it's just great to see where the market's going. What do you see as the ultimate plan for CERIA? Where do you plan to expand, or predicting where you want to be in a few years as you scale? What are your goals, Keith?
Well, for us, it's a little more complex because we have the same brand, CERIA, that's in the non-alcoholic world and the cannabis world. And so yeah, we do want to be one of the top NA producers in the US for the non-infused business. And for the infused business, we want to be one of the top cannabis beverages in the United States. And so it's such a small market right now, both NA, because when you look at just market size, NA is just a fraction of the beer market. I mean, it's growing strongly, but it's just a small fraction. Cannabis beverages, again, they're growing very nicely, but it's a small percentage of the overall cannabis market. So both of these categories are tiny. They're smaller than other forms, other categories in that market. And so we want to be the top, if not the top, then one of the top NA non-infused and one of the top infused brands out there.
Fantastic. Are there plans to ultimately have a tap room?
We'd like to, yeah. But at this time, what we want to do is really focus our funds on sales and marketing and packaging and branding, because for us, it's critical to grow this brand and get people to understand it and make an emotional bond with our brand. When you think of CERIA, it's still so new that a lot of people, some people don't even know how to pronounce it. They say CERIA or Syria or. And it's like, no, it's CERIA. And you show them the can and you say, it's CERIA, rhymes with area. And so they say, oh, I get it. Because I'm not sure if you're old enough to remember, but I remember when Nike launched was it 80s or 90s? When they launched, I remember I was a kid and I remember my friends and I saw the name and we said, oh, Nike. I like that Nike, the swoosh stripe and everything. It's like, oh, I want to get a pair of Nikes. And then everybody pronounced it like Mike. And I remember they ran a few ad campaigns on how to pronounce it. It's Nike. It was like Greek for victory or something like that. And it was just those couple of campaigns and everybody changed almost overnight. People said, oh, I get it. It's Nike. And so same thing with us. We're still in that the Nike phase. So yeah, it's
CERIA-like area. But I believe you're named after, is it Ceres, the Roman goddess of agriculture?
Yes, the Roman. She's the profile you see on our picture, the logo, is Ceres, the Roman goddess of agriculture and fertility too. But she's we thought she's the perfect image to put on our labels. And the nice part is we started out in the cannabis beverage business, and so we thought we're going to keep all the heritage of that, even in the non-infused business. So if you look at her laurel, it consists of hop leaves and cannabis. Cannabis leaves and hop cones. That's what it is. And
I think it's a fantastic logo. Have you got it tattooed on your bicep yet?
No, I should do that. Once I start working out again.
Now, Keith, I have one final question for you, because you're such a family man. You started this business with your wife. I know your daughter works with you some.
Yes.
What's it like running a business with some of the closest people to you?
It's funny because I remember before we started, I read all these articles and of warning, this could happen, warning, that could happen, and all these things. And it's like, oh man, if we start this up, it's like we could actually get divorced. It's, and then you read horror stories about people getting divorced, and it's like, oh man. Because my wife and I, a lot of people don't realize it, but we're high school sweethearts. We've been together since she was a sophomore and I was a junior, and so
amazing.
Yeah, and it's been over 40 years, and so we've grown together, like over the course of my career at Blue Moon, and she's a professional engineer, a civil engineer. And so she had her career. So I know she's smart, and I've always respected what she's done. And so I guess we went into that into the business respecting each other and knowing that each of us had our own strengths, unique strengths, different from the other. So so I think because of that, we've gotten along really well working, because I know she's more a numbers person. I hate numbers. It's like if you put a spreadsheet in front of me saying, "Oh man, we're off by 5 cents somewhere in this accounting ledger. We're off by 5 cents. We got to find it." It's like I'm the first person you should not ask, because I'd say, "Here's a nickel. Here's a nickel. You're even now." But she's the type that would go through, and she would either write a little program to find it, or she would physically go through and say, "Here it is." And she's a numbers person, but she's also really detailed. She looks at those details everywhere. So if we've got a bunch of labels that we're designing, and it's like we don't know why we like one or the other, she'd probably find the detail right there. She said, "You probably like it because of that little thing right there." And it's like, yeah, that's it. So she's numbers driven. She's detailed. That's one reason she's the CEO. I'm the brewmaster, because I pride myself on making great beers, and I'm a beer scientist as well as a beer artist. So together we work really well. So to answer your question, to make a short story long, we get together well because I think we're opposites. And our daughter Catherine, she also works with us, and she's like a combination of us, because she's smart and she's creative. In fact, she's with me here at our contract brewer in St. Louis, and she's helping oversee we're scaling up a whole new method of making non-alcoholic beer, which we believe is revolutionary. And so she's seen it firsthand and helping with the scale up and getting things going. And she's a mechanical engineer by formal education, so she can understand all that background mechanics of what's happening. And so and again, our daughter, if she's into the details like an engineer. For me, it's like, if I look at the big picture and it's working, it tastes good, smells good, it's like, okay, it's like we're there. and I'll write the specs and everything, but she'll dig into the details and really find out what's happening. And I'll try that given my PhD, but I don't like that. An engineer, something inside them really likes getting in and crunching those numbers and getting to the meat of everything. So yeah, as a family, I think we work well together. Yeah, my wife and I still enjoy going to work together. We're in the same office, and so yeah, it's actually it's fun. I enjoy working with her.
No, I've loved to follow your journey. I mean, just hearing about your early days creating Blue Moon to where you are now, and just hearing the excitement in your voice, I absolutely love it, because that positive outlook, I mean, and what you've built with your family is absolutely amazing. I mean, you've been the beer doctor. You've been arguably the father of gays, if I dare say that. But now you're just revolutioning a whole new part of the industry with your involvement in infusing and non-alcoholic. I'm very excited to see you continue to grow and try everything you put out. So Keith, I really appreciate you hanging out with me today. I'm really looking forward to the day I get to hang out with you in person, because I think that's going to be a blast. But
Andrew, anytime you're in Colorado, please give us a call, because it'd be fun to just have one of our NAs, have one of our actually our 10 milligram, because it'd be fun to have a couple of the 10 milligram ones, because we designed our NA beer, or our infused beers, to have a similar buzz that you get from the alcoholic equivalent. So 10 milligrams is kind of equivalent to about a 8 to 10% alcohol beer, and the 5 milligram Belgian white is kind of similar to a 5% ABV beer. And so yeah, so if ever you're in Colorado, please come out. It'd be fun to have some beers with you, and we'd be sure to get you an Uber or a Lyft back to your hotel so you get back safely.
Well, I'm going to hold you to it, because I'm going to see you in September. Yes. So I'm
awesome.
Looking forward to it. I've enjoyed hanging out with you today, Keith, and go enjoy your beautiful day and safe travels from St. Louis back home.
Thanks, Andrew, and cheers. Thanks for having me on, and cheers to all your listeners too. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
Okay. Bye-bye.